How many of you guys would agree with this statement? We live in a toxic world. How many of you guys see, the world around you is toxic. It's out to steal your joy. It's out to kill you. It's out to destroy you. That this life can tend to bog us down. I think one of the most common used words in your generation are words like busy. I'm just busy. How many of you guys have busy lives? And you somehow feel like, it's not true, but deep down you feel like there's less than 24 hours in a day than there used to be in previous generations. You're like, I just don't get it. Spoiler alert, there are still 24 hours in a day. It's how you use them. And so I think your generation is being tagged as the most anxious, stressed out generation known to man. You are considered to be the most informed, and yet wisdom and knowledge is going down at an alarming rate. You guys are the most informed, but least prepared to live a confident, victorious life. And the world around us can just tend to bog us down. The social pressures, social media can bog us down. Our friends can bog us down. Our parents can bog us down. Just life in general can weigh us down to the point we feel like we're just living in this toxic world as victims. And so let me kind of explain some truth. This one is only for the Christians in the house. If you're not a Christian in this place, that's okay. We say this all the time. You don't need to necessarily believe how we believe, but you just belong here. You have a spot to call home. You have a place where you're not going to be judged. You have a place where you can seek truth. And in this place, we believe in Jesus, and we believe that he provides the best life. He's the one and only true God, and we're going to follow that way. But if you don't believe that way, that's fine. But this promise is not for you. But for the Christians in the house, this toxic world is not our home. We have to live with that truth, that heaven is our home. And if we live with that truth, see, this is what I was worried about. If you truly understood that, you would live your life completely different. If you understood that, yeah, I get it. This world is toxic. It's crazy. But I understand this isn't my home. My home is in heaven. That I am outside of the rules of this world. I've got a greater authority in Jesus. I've got a greater authority in God, and my home is in heaven. And if you understood that, you would live this world differently. You would live out your life understanding this is temporary, that you are just passing through, the things that would try to destroy you, you realize are temporary, but you've got an eternal mindset. But the reality is that most people will never live out a truly fulfilled Christian life because of that deep-seated need to be accepted by the people around us. And so because of that, it drives us into all kinds of crazy things. The toxic, you think about the violence that's going on in this world at an alarming rate. You think about the bullying that goes on in your schools. The suicide rates are climbing and are higher than ever. Abortion rates are on the rise. Mental illness is increasing. Racism. We think that some people think that racism isn't an issue. If you're in this place and you think that's true, you are kidding yourselves. Racism is still an issue. For the people that I talk to, I would say it like this, that your schools have very much become a culture of tolerance, but not reconciliation. We believe in reconciling cultures, meaning this, your school is diverse, but your lunch table probably isn't. That's kind of how we say that, is that you're surrounded by other cultures, but when push comes to shove, people tend to stick to their own, and you still hear jokes that are inappropriate. You still have people behaving certain ways. That we believe that there's a greater life in that, and we believe that we are better together. We're better different. We're better unified. We're better when we can all come under the banner of Jesus Christ and live as one race. That's a big deal to us. This culture has a lack of morals. You see a culture that is sexually fluid. 5 years ago, we used to say sexually confused. Now we just say sexually fluid because the perception is that you're not confused. Everything is just fluid. You can bounce one way or another. We don't even know which pronouns to use. It's like everyone's on edge, worried that everyone is going to offend everyone, and the only people that seem to get it the worst is Christians. It's like everything's okay except for the Christians because they're the judgmental ones, right? And so you guys feel that pressure of what it's like to feel like you can't say anything because you're going to come across as just ignorant or judgmental or harsh or religious or whatever that might be, that you have this life inside of you as a Christian, but the world is portraying the life that you claim as something completely different, and so you're torn. You don't even know what to do. But we have to understand that this deep-seated need to be accepted by our peers will cause us to do crazy things. That's why girls will take off more clothes than they're comfortable to post pictures online to get likes, because a toxic attention is better than no attention, right? It's why guys will lie about their sexual activity, because like false acceptance is better than unacceptance. It's why people will like drink stuff, smoke stuff, pop pills, do whatever they have to do, because they'd rather they understand that peer pressure is real, but it's also toxic. People will sacrifice things they once said that they would never do for the ability to be accepted by culture. But if you read the Bible, time and time and time again, Jesus is so clear about this. He says that you are not of this world. I've called you out of this world. That in this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome this world. Time and time again, he says this world is not your home. You should live as aliens and refugees in this place, simply passing through over and over and over again. He's trying to get us to realize that we are not in this world. That that we are in this world, but we're not called to be of this world. That even though this is the environment we're around, we're supposed to be the ones that are changing the culture, not being a victim of the culture. We're not supposed to be a subculture, we're supposed to be a counterculture. But that need to be accepted and the need to have an easy life tends to overwhelm us sometimes. And so I've got three choices that we've got to make that I'd like you to take notes on. Three things that I believe that every single person is going to have to decide on whether or not you're going to allow this toxic world to overtake you, or if you're going to be like Christ and you're going to overcome this world. And before I go into those three, I just want to kind of have a moment of honesty. Like tonight, I've been so looking forward tonight, because I believe starting tonight and over the next several weeks, I believe there are so many lives that are going to be changed. I believe that eternal destinies are going to be radically transformed. And it is no shock to me that I just had the toughest time getting my thoughts gathered for tonight, being focused, trying to figure out what I wanted to say to you guys. And so, and I hear this a lot from you guys. A lot of you guys have told me you want to share your faith, but when it comes down to it, you're not sure what to say or how to say it, or you're worried that they're going to ask a question and you don't know what your response is going to be. Is this ringing a bell with any of you guys? You're like, man, the want to is on 10, but the know how to is at a 2.5. I'm feeling that tonight, and there's no net. I still have to be on the microphone. I wish I could just kind of punt and be like, you know what? I'm not ready. Just come back next week. But I can't do that. And so I've got to finish this thing. And so I'm going to stick with what I know. And what I know is this, is that the Bible says that the enemy is overcome by the blood of the Lamb, which means what Jesus did as a sacrifice for your sin and mine. And he's overcome by the word of our testimony, basically my experiences with God. And so as I give you these 3 points, I'm going to just tell you a little bit more in depth about my story. And because I believe that my story is going to resonate with some of you guys, that some of you guys are going to need to hear some of this stuff tonight. So choice number one, if you're taking notes, write this down. Choice number one is this. You're going to have to choose between the wide versus the narrow. You're going to have to choose between the wide versus the narrow. And I'm going to kind of give some verses that are going to explain some of this stuff. In the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, Jesus says this: you can enter God's kingdom only, everyone say only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for the many who choose that way. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult, and only a few ever find it. Here's the reality, is that God's way is the harder way. If you've ever had a preacher tell you that once you give your heart to Jesus, everything's going to be easy, everything's going to be great, your life is going to be awesome, you have been lied to, my friend. In fact, if you have given your life to Christ recently, you are probably living some of the most difficult days of your life. It is no coincidence that when you try to move forward in your relationship with God, that your life tends to get a lot more difficult before it gets easier. Because the enemy is real, and he does not like that you're trying to live for Jesus. He is more than content watching you live a pitiful life, but once you start to live an excellent, godly life, then he starts coming after you. And so you're going to have to make that choice. Do you want the easy road, or do you want the difficult road? And at face value, a lot of you are like, the difficult road. Like, no, don't lie to yourself. Like, come on. Like, we're in church. You can lie to me, that's fine. Don't lie to yourself. We want the easy road. That's why it's easy. Like, we want the easier path. We want the path of least resistance. But if any of you have done anything of excellence in any area of life, you know it probably cost you something. That if you want to be excellent at something, you're going to have to train harder than everyone else, work harder than everyone else, put in more time than everyone else. That when everyone else is doing other things, you're going to have to focus on the thing you want to be excellent at. So if you want to be excellent at life, it's going to be more difficult than other people. Have you ever seen this to be true? It's like you're trying to live for God, but it seems like all the people that are just going to hell and they know it seem to be living the easier, better life. Like that's the Bible promises us that. It says that sin is fun for a season. That's why they do it, because it's fun. And you guys are living in a season of life where they are maxing out on the funness of that sinful lifestyle, okay? But I promise you this, they are peaking right now before your very eyes. So the ones that you're jealous of, the ones that you wish you could go to the party with, the one that you wish you had as many followers as them, or whatever it looks like, I promise you that life peaks at about 21 years old. And it's just this slow, sad downhill spiral from there. I am on a reunion year of my high school. That's a weird way to say that. I graduated high school 20 years ago. 2020 will be 20 years. And so I haven't talked to most of my high school friends since, the day I graduated. But all of a sudden, it's reunion time. And so you start getting tagged in photos on Facebook. That's how it works for old people. Someone posted like our class picture. All of a sudden, it's all this thread. And it just kind of took me down this like reminiscent track. And man, it was sad. It really, really was. It made me extremely grateful that I made some changes in my life, that God got a hold of my heart. It was bizarre. Like there was friends that were on their second, third, fourth marriage. There was people that were like still doing the same exact stuff that they were in high school. Like nothing has changed about their life. I'll kind of get to this, but I made a lot of bad choices in high school, and so did a lot of my friends. I've had one of my friends, so I just kind of started looking everyone up. One of my best friends, which I already knew this, I knew all of this. None of this was like a recent surprise, but one of my best friends had died from a cocaine overdose. One of my friends, just in this past year, died from complications to basically his alcoholism. I had another friend lose an eye because of his alcoholism, that his liver basically shut down and he got an infection and he lost his eye. I've got other friends that have lost jobs. Like you can just tell, like they're just strung out. Like you look at them and they like, I know I look old. I get this, okay? I'm fully aware of this. If you think I look old, like they look like my grandparents, okay? Like life has just beat them to shreds. Never wanted to go to a high school reunion before, but I kind of want to go to this one just for like the ego boost, if nothing else. But I probably won't. But it's crazy to watch what like 20 years of living in the world will do for you. The ones that thought like they had it all figured out in life, the ones that like were like the most likely to succeed are like still trying to take step one towards that endeavor. Like some of the ones that were like best dressed or best looking are neither of those things right now. I've shared this before. I won several of those senior superlatives. I was best car. That was the only good one. I was voted least likely to graduate. Most likely to get lung cancer. That one was just awful. I went to a Christian school. Like, how are they going to say, like, how's that going to get in the yearbook? Most likely to be on Cops. Do you guys even know what that show is? Bad guy. I was a bad dude. And it's just crazy to think, like, I spent so much effort trying to get those people to like me. Like, I was the guy who would go to parties, if you know me, I don't really do a whole lot halfway. I'm just never really been that guy. And, say what it is, for better or worse, I was that same way when it came to drugs and alcohol. Some people would they would take all night to get wasted. Not me, man. I was 20 minutes, get hammered, let's do this. And because of that, my friends could get me to do anything and everything. I am so grateful that YouTube and camera phones were not a thing when I was your age. I don't think I could be on the stage. I think people would just put my stuff on blast and be like, that guy can't be a pastor. There's no way. I made a ton of bad mistakes, but I wouldn't have said it like this back then. But in hindsight, I would do whatever it took to not feel like this spotlight was on me, but to feel like I was just accepted and like everyone else. We live in a world that claims that everyone wants to be unique, but those unique people shop at the same unique stores that all the other unique people shop at. The reality is, we don't want to stand out. We want to go with the flow. We don't want to do anything to rock the boat. Some of you guys, you wouldn't even do charades tonight because you're God forbid someone look at me doing charades. I can't do that. I can't have that much attention. I can't, you just want to kind of blend in, but then you're mad that no one notices you. And so you do things that you don't want to do so that people will notice you, but not the real you, because that would cost you too much. It's this vicious cycle to where you do and don't want to be noticed at the same time. And that's why you're I just can't even with this life. It's just too much. But you're gonna have to choose. The easy way is to blend in. Don't do anything to rock the boat. Don't do anything to stand out. For sure, don't do anything to be known as a Christian in your school, because then they're going to have questions for you. For sure, don't offer to pray with anyone. Don't ever tell them about the Capitol. That's the easy road. Just get by, survive high school, and lie to yourself and think that college is when it's all going to get better. And then when that doesn't come true, just lie to yourself again and say, when I get out of college and I get a degree, then, because you're going to get the dream job. That's how it happens for everyone. If you didn't know this, you go to college, they give you a job for whatever you went to school for, and name your salary. That's how it works, right? You laugh, but that's how you treat it sometimes. Some of you guys have career paths that don't exist. Can I just burst your bubble now? Some of the stuff that you want to do, no one will pay you to do, okay? You're going to have to pay your dues. You're going to have to get jobs you don't like. You're going to have to do things that just earn a paycheck, okay? And hopefully, along the way, you're going to find this better life. But that's a different message for a different day. Point number 2, if you're taking notes, write this down. Number 1 was wide versus narrow. Number 2, you're going to have to choose between being happy and being holy. Being happy versus being holy. Now, before I forget to say this later, all of these things, they're not necessarily always opposing. But sometimes you're going to have to choose between the two. Not to say that God never wants us happy, but a lot of us have convinced ourselves that God's greatest desire for our lives is for us to be happy. Let me show you the verse that says that. It's in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 14 through 16. This is what it says. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. In other words, before you knew God. Don't do that. But just as he who called you is happy, so be happy in all you do. For it is written, be happy because I am happy. You guys know that that's what it says? Does anyone not believe that that's what it says? Okay, some of you guys I don't know. I've never read the Bible. That's fine. Let me tell you, that's not what it says. All of those words were holy. As obedient children, don't conform to the evil desires you had before you knew Jesus. But just as Jesus who called you is holy, so be holy in all that you do. For it is written, be holy because I, the Lord, am holy. God is not concerned about your happiness. Believe it or not, the world does not revolve around you for the sole desire to make you more happy. God did not send his son Jesus to die on a cross so that you could be happy. He died on a cross so that you could be holy. And holy is it's this big kind of intimidating, fancy, churchy word. It just means to be pure, to be different, to be set apart. To be purified and set apart from the rest of this world. To be holy means to be different. to be pure, to be anti-culture, to be counterculture, to be better than culture, to be this like mysterious but appealing different way about you, to be holy. But that's difficult. I know after I gave my heart to Jesus, it was my first semester after high school. I was in a room much similar to this. I gave my heart to God, and some of my first prayers were not very pastoral in my prayers. A lot of my first prayers were like, God, what do you want from me? Like, God, this is hard. God, if I'm going to be a Christian, I don't want to be like everyone else that I see that calls themselves Christians. Because I went to a religious school where everyone thought they were Christians. But all of those so-called Christians would go to the same parties I would go to, do the same things I did at the parties, but then they'd have to go home early Saturday night because they still had to go to church Sunday morning and feel miserable about their lives. I was more than content being one person. Miserable as I was, depressed as I was, at least it was just one miserable person. I can't even imagine the weight that is on some of you to live two miserable lives. Like that, it's got to be difficult. It really does. To remember, this friend knows I go to church, but this one doesn't. And this one knows that I do that thing on the weekends, but that one doesn't. So I can't eat lunch with them because then they'll know, and I can't combine those worlds. Like, this world is tough when we live two lives. It's twice as hard because it's two fake images to uphold. And so you're going to have to make that choice if you're going to be happy or you're going to be holy. But it's going to take some effort. For me, and again, I made a billion mistakes since I've given my heart to Jesus. One of the good decisions that I made was on the weekends after I gave my heart to Jesus. The phone calls would still come in. The parties were still happening. But believe it or not, like not all drugs and alcohol left Rockford, Illinois when I gave my heart to Jesus. Like those same parties still existed. The same drug dealers still had my phone number. Like all of the same life still existed, and they did not care that I made a decision on a Wednesday night. All of those same decisions came there, and I would just stay home. And I'd love to tell you, like, it made me so happy. It didn't. It was lonely. It was really, really stinking lonely. Like hearing about what was going on the weekends and hearing all the fun that people were having and like the temptation, like when you're going through withdrawals and you wish you could just go back to that old lifestyle because it'd be so much easier. I committed myself to get to know the creator of the universe who saved my soul. Like for me, I don't care about anyone else in this room. For me, there is nothing you could do to convince me that God doesn't exist. Like I know that I know that I know that I know that God reached down from heaven and grabbed a hold of my heart that was made of stone, and he crushed it, and he gave me a heart of flesh, and he softened my heart, and he made me responsive to him. And he just told me how much he loved me, and he told me how much he cared. And when I accepted God into my heart for the very first time, I was happy, but even more than that, I had peace. A peace that I did not have for the first 18 years of my life. I wouldn't have been able to say it like this at the time, but I had spent 18 years trying to achieve peace and happiness in my life, and none of those things did it. It just complicated things even worse. And so while everyone else would keep doing the same thing that everyone else was doing on the wide path, I was on the narrow path. And I would journal, and I would pray, and I would read my Bible, and I would research stuff. I had questions, and I would write down questions, and every week I would meet with my small group leader, and we would just go over those questions together. And you're like, man, I wish my small group leader would do that for me. I called him. Like, that one was for free, okay? If you want more from your small group leaders, ask them. I'm telling you, they are more than willing to be more involved in your life. And you're like, no, they don't. Yes, they do. If you would just respond to a text every once in a while, if you would just pick up the phone when they call, if you would give the real phone number on the small group roster, like if you would just do some of these simple things, I'm telling you, like we can be a great resource for you. And there's no shame in asking honest questions. Like the smartest people in the earth ask the best questions. Like, if I could tell you one thing I've learned in all my years of living, it's that smart people ask good questions. They just do. It's the ones that just take everything given to them at face value that get duped and get like lured by every new idea that's thrown their way. But when you really dig into this and be like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about that? Your small group, and here's the deal, like your small group leader won't have all the answers. And neither will I. but I'm more than willing to research those answers with you. I'm more than willing to walk alongside some of you guys and figure some of this stuff out. But had I not made those lonely Friday night choices, I would have been happier for a season, but I guaranteed eventually I would have just fallen back into that old life. It's just the facts. Number 3 is this. Number 1 was wide versus narrow. Number 2 is happy versus holy. Number 3, you're going to have to decide between whether you're going to conform or transform. Whether you're going to conform or transform. Romans 12:2. A lot of you guys have heard this verse before. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, his pleasing, and his perfect will." Part of my story that I'm grateful for is that I thought I was pretty good at being bad. In hindsight, I was not very good at being very bad. I would get arrested more than once. Didn't always get arrested, but on several occasions I did. And because of that, I got to learn a lot more about life than my friends did. I got to experience some choices between jail and rehab. I chose rehab. In rehab, I discovered that I was an addict. I didn't think I was an addict, but I had to take an evaluation, and I was an addict. And I remember them telling me, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, has feathers like a duck, it's probably a duck. And so I was like, maybe, but I don't think I'm an addict. But here's more than that, here's what I learned, is that try as I may, there is no way on my own strength I was just going to walk my way out of being a drug addict. There's just no way. Like, it was too deep rooted inside of me. My father was an alcoholic and drug addict. Like, his dad was an alcoholic. I'm sure his dad was an alcoholic. Like, this was more than just me making a few bad choices. This was generational. This was genetic. This was like spiritual. This was emotional. I had built up my entire life around my addictions. And there was no way I was going to be able to do this. I know this because only an idiot, only a complete and utter moron would have made the choices that I made after I got arrested and went to rehab. When I didn't have a license and all of a sudden the phone call stopped and no one was there to take me to the parties and it was lonely, but I had one friend and he was a drug addict and an alcoholic and he would take me to parties while I was on probation, no license, in rehab, and I would still go to parties. Like, moron. And you're like, I would never. Come on. Like, I already told you, like, don't lie to yourself. How many times have you said, I'll never do that thing again, God? Just because it's not drugs. Maybe it's not alcohol. Maybe it is. Maybe it's that same website that you're like, I would never. I would never. Oh, I did. God, I will never again. Oh, my bad. God, I will never, ever until tomorrow. Like, I will never. Your heart gets broken. I'm never going to let someone break my heart again. Ooh, they look nice. But I will never, I'll never, right? Like, have I gotten everyone yet? Like, some of you guys are looking at me side-eyed like you've never done anything wrong in your life more than once. But I did. And I got in trouble time and time again. And the reality is, I would be dead or in jail by now. I know that because some of my friends are either dead or in jail. Like, that was my entire world. And it was because of the choices that I made. And there was no way I was ever going to choice and effort my way out of that addiction. And that's what conforming is. Conforming is default mode. To conform to the pattern of this world. It's I don't want to stand out anymore. I'm just going to blend back in. To transform is something that only God can do. You cannot transform your life. A good intellectual podcast cannot transform your life. Good friends cannot transform your life. That future love that will be your future breakup cannot transform your life. Your small group leaders, your church, like, none of those things can transform your life. Only God can take something that is and miraculously recreate it into something brand new. And I know this because I've experienced this. That only God can do this. Only God can transform your life. But that's a choice that you're going to have to make. Am I going to conform and keep lying to myself and thinking I can get myself out of this addiction, out of this bad habit, that eventually I'll get serious about God. Eventually, when I'm done having fun, I'll get serious with God. Or you can decide that it's got to be the living God who's going to transform my life. I've got to surrender my life to him. I've got to bow my knee and accept him into my heart. Band's going to come out. I'm going to tell you about one last story, and then we're going to kind of close. Just to recap, you got to choose wide versus narrow. You got to choose happy versus holy. You got to choose conform versus transform. Basically, you're going to have to choose if you're going to live your life or if you're going to live the life that God wants for you. And here's something interesting I found. On this day, on September the 4th, 1957, something happened in this country that was pretty profound. Back in 1957, most of America was still very much segregated, black from white. In 1957, in Little Rock, Arkansas, we have what we now know as the Little Rock Nine. Do any of you guys know who the Little Rock Nine are? Okay, a lot of you guys. That's awesome. If you haven't heard about this, basically in Little Rock, Arkansas, the president had passed legislation to say that segregation in schools is unconstitutional, that we are created equal, that we cannot provide different levels of education based on race. If we're going to have a public school system, it must be a public school system. But the governor, I believe it was the governor, or maybe the mayor of Little Rock, Arkansas, said, if you try to force desegregation, their blood will run in the streets. And he brought in the National Guard to ensure that Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas would not be integrated, that it would continue to remain a white-only school. And so the Little Rock Nine was 9 African-American students that showed up on this day in 1957 to go to school, to what seems so common to us, to have the same education as everyone else in society at that time. They just showed up to go to school. They were very brave. But when they showed up that day, 8 of the 9 had decided to kind of all meet up together and to show up to school. They came kind of by police escort. One girl came by herself and realized that she was in a very dangerous situation. Both groups of people, the 8 and the 1, when they showed up on the scene, had the National Guard as a barricade, refusing to let them in. Can you just imagine your age, walking to school and having the National Guard can't tell you that you can't go into school because of what you look like. And literally, as all the white students were going right through the barricades, right through the National Guard, they're sitting there with weapons telling them they can't go to school. And so they went home, didn't go to school that day, regrouped. It wasn't until the end of that month that they actually got into school. The president himself had to bring in the U.S. Army. I think it was the 101st Airborne, had to come, rifles in hand, basically a war scene going on to ensure that these people could have equal access to education. It's crazy. They interviewed several of them, obviously, but there was one particular quote that I found extra interesting by Ernest Green, who was the first African-American to graduate from that high school. And they were interviewing him, and they were like, what was it like? And he was like, he kind of laughed. He's like, what do you think it was like? He said, here's the quote, "It was a rejection deeper than anything I had ever experienced." Obviously, it was this crazy scene, National Guard refusing to let them in, had to bring in the army to make sure they could get in just to get into school. Now, you guys can probably guess that just because they got in the school didn't mean life was all easy for them. They emotionally abused, physically abused, they were harassed everywhere they went. You can look it up, all kinds of pictures. And what's even crazier to me is I can't imagine being a photographer in that time and living with myself. They're just sitting there taking pictures. Pictures of one black student surrounded by a mob of angry white students, tripping them, kicking them, spitting at them, holding up signs, just all this. And they're just sitting there. I can't imagine that world. But obviously, they had to make narrow road choices. They had to make like difficult choices every single day of their life to hope to create some sort of change. And this is what he says: a rejection deeper than anything I had ever experienced. But it seemed to me that if they were going through all this trouble to keep me out, there was something bigger than simply my going to class. Like, that was the mindset he had. And I thought that was so profound. Like, some of you guys, you're going through hardships and you're like, this is all about me. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's about a whole lot more than you. Because maybe, just maybe, and this is what I believe, that God has a destiny for your life. That God has a purpose for your life. That the things that you're going through, maybe you're like me, maybe like you are in the midst of like living what you think is your best life. And you are just sin. You don't care that it's sin, you're having fun. And like for me, I was like, God, why are all my friends getting away with this? Like, why am I the one that's getting ratted out? There was hundreds of people at the party, but I'm the only one in the principal's office on Monday morning. Like, what, God, why? Maybe, just maybe, God knew that I was supposed to be here on September 4th. And that he cared about me too much to let me ruin my own life with my own selfish addictions. That maybe he was willing to allow me or help me get to rock bottom so that I would finally be open to trying something else, which was a friend inviting me to a place like this. Like, maybe the things that you're going through are something bigger than just what you're going through. Like, if you're feeling resistance, or you're feeling all of a sudden like you don't fit in where you fit in, or maybe you feel like, man, just your same old friends, even if they're church friends, you're just feeling like, man, God is calling you to separate yourself, like God is calling to a higher level, but you're worried about what that's gonna cost you. Maybe, just maybe, God's plan is on the other side of that choice. That the other side of making that difficult, I'm gonna make the holy choice instead of the happy choice. Maybe for a season, I'm gonna sacrifice some of my time to focus more on God, whatever that might look like. Maybe there's something bigger on the other side of that. Like, I'm sure they had a clue because of the magnitude of this, but who knows what would have happened if they just, September 4th, went to school, saw the National Guard, was like, I'm out. Like, I don't care anymore. I'm just gonna go back to my old life. But they didn't. They chose to go through that way. And that's the life as Christians that we're called to live. We live in a toxic world, and we all understand that, but we also need to understand that God has called us out of that world. But he didn't call us to escape from the world. He called us to be in the world, but not of the world. That we're not supposed to have the mindset of the world, even though we're supposed to live every day surrounded by the world, because God said that we're supposed to be light to the world. Like, if you're saying, man, this world is dark, like this world is evil, it's lacking you shining. That's the only difference. God calls us to be the salt to the world. And you're like, man, this life, like the choices are just crazy. Like, how is that where everyone's going? Because you're supposed to show them the other way. Like, a lot of times your greatest frustrations right now, however old you are today, your greatest frustration in this life is probably a clue into the calling God has in your life.